Well, good morning, everybody. I'm going to do it shorter for many reasons. First reason is that my English is poor, so I will apologize for my bad English. It's not really English, it's some kind of globish, but very useful in this Europe. First thing I want to say is that our approach to a project has no really clear borders. So we merge many projects. We discuss with Montserrat and other partners that we search for a Mediterranean way of innovation, and that means also a Mediterranean way of research. So our presentation is not so clear, so from one point to another point, it's more chaotic, more holistic. Well, our role in the partnerships is to analyze strictly the dimension of the cultural dimension of all this process. So our title is INNOCULT, that's innovation through culture, and we are a research team composed by economists, basically economists. So there is Professor Josep Sorribes that is there, Raúl Aveledo, Ramón Marrades, Vicente Coy that is not here, and then we incorporate people working with us as PhD people, and doing very interesting things as you are going to see now. No? Well, as you know, we have to plan the project. We planned these projects 4 years ago, and this is very difficult. To plan innovation is very difficult. So one part of our job is to struggle with plans. No? The initial plan was to deal with 3 specific sectors in a specific territory that was the Valencia, mainly because we thought in this time that these three sectors have some specific characteristics that could be very interesting in research about these 3 sectors. We make an initial approach from the macro approach, that is the dynamics of cultural and creative sectors in the development of territories with this macro approach, and then we have a micro approach with, well, let's see the organizations of the cultural and creative organization and how these organizations generated innovation and how this innovation flows to other parts of society, of cities, of territories, and so on. So we plan at the first moment to analyze the musical societies as very specific organizations in Valencia, very traditional organizations. Some of these organizations have more than 100 years, and they play music, they train in music for people, and they still there for 100 years, and no crisis, no problems kill this kind of organization. So we have more than 500 of these organizations in Valencia, and they are spread all over the territory. There are no difference in the coast, in the mountains, in territories, Catalan speakers territories or Castilla, Spanish speaking territories. So probably it's the most differential cultural attribute of the region of Valencia, probably, will be this. Why is this kind of organizations interesting? Because we can research how can we produce innovation in this kind of very traditional organization. And with another project, we organize a 1 year period of reflections about this kind of organization with a very participatory process. This is the website of a big congress of these organizations, and this is a very participatory model where we make quiz and questionnaires over all these themes about governance, about innovation, about and so on. So, and we work in a very, this first year we work organizing this general assembly or general meeting of musical societies, and we get some information. We do also some these academic results with publication about the economic dimension of these organizations and so on. But finally, I think the most interesting result of the project is that on average, we can detect that organizations are quite traditional. The attitude to innovation is very low. But when we analyze in more deep about this organization, we can see that the average is very traditional, but we have very, very traditional people and very, very innovative people. So the average traditional, but there are a part of people that are very, very innovative. What happens with the crisis? That with the crisis, the crisis creates a space for these innovative people. Sorry. So the crisis make that the traditional people go a bit on the back, and the innovative people go get the control of the organization, so they make very innovative initiatives during this crisis period. So that means that that in this kind of organizations, crisis is an opportunity for innovators, because they have the place to take the governance of these organizations, and they make very, very, very spectacular and new things in this kind of organization with a lot of resource. They mobilize these kinds of resource. Well, so you only need, in this kind of organization, you only need a critical mass of innovators to produce big movements to innovation, to innovative approaches. Well, we combined in this first year this analysis of the musical societies with other study cases, especially Professor Raúl Aveledo analyzed some kind of other organizations that we work with a very specific study case and trying to detect, because the problem of cultural organization and creative organization that you cannot fit in a box. They are very idiosyncratic. It depends a lot with special people that do not behave in a normal way, so you cannot normalize people working in cultural and creative organizations. So the methodology of the study case are very interesting. We are finally, as we will see at the end, finally we are working with a very unstable chemistry. So in some cases you can combine some things and you produce one result, but you do the same in other place, in other moment, in other organization, you combine the same things and you get completely another result. So the study case, the approach of the study case is very, very useful to see in each organization, in each moment, which are the drivers of innovation of this cultural and creative organization. And this is a problematic view because when you want to normalize the public policies oriented to these organizations, then you don't have rules, you don't have regularity, and you have to adapt to each territory and to each kind of organizations. well, then we worked, the second sector was the heritage sector. The heritage sector is a very interesting sector also to analyze innovation and how innovation can go, because in principle, in a first approach, there is not too much innovation in the heritage sector. By definition, no? It's more memory and less innovation. But we do some works about the heritage sectors. As we are economists, we produce a quite of works in calculating the economic impact of this intervention in heritage. We develop also a tool, a web tool, to automatize the calculation of economic impact of museums, and that is called Impactrimonio. And we do a web tool, and now we are trying to sell it to Brazil and to other places. And with this tool, we make some calculations and we publish some academic results about economic impact of these questions. But what it could be very interesting is with two PhD collaborators. One is Julio Montagut, that make a PhD dissertation that is going to read it now about the contingent valuation of heritage. And he compared the results before the crisis, the willingness to pay of people about heritage before the crisis and after the crisis, and we can measure the difference in this process. So very interesting PhD dissertation that is going to be presented the next weeks. And we deal with innovation in a very complex way, led by Joan, that is also here, and that is going to present some results of this approach about innovation in a very specific heritage or institutions related that are museums. And it's really complex. We have some discussion about what means innovation in this kind of institution, and I think this is very, the Joan approach is very sophisticated about the concept of innovation in museums, and he will present some results in some presentations. So very, very interesting also. Then we plan, well, then we research about this macro approach. And this macro approach, I think this macro approach is very fruitful, and we use it in another project. This is the Creative Med project, an European project, and we make some more econometric research with another collaborator of the group, that is Rafa Boix, that is going to present something also in this conference, so we will see more detailed results. But what we can conclude from this approach, well, cultural and creative activities are, on average, more innovative than the medium of the economy, and this is, we don't need too much research to achieve this conclusion, but it's really so. We can conclude that we have evidence, empirical evidence of these questions. The other question is that the dimension of cultural and creative sectors are, or clearly explains, the income per capita of European regions. So there are the dynamic of these sectors are very important to explain regional income per capita in Europe, at least in Europe. I don't want to say that this is a universal true, but at least in Europe this is true. And probably the relationship between the dimension of cultural and creative sectors and regional growth or regional economic performance is not so clear. We have a kind of black box in the middle. We know that happens, and we research about causality. This is not only a correlation, but it's causality. We have some kind of publication analyzing the causality of this process, and finally we conclude that the causality is around causality, so better, bigger cultural and creative sectors increase the economic performance of the region in this sense, and also in the other sense. Better performance of the region finally have some effects on the dimension of cultural and creative sectors. So we have a kind of with difference, temporary difference between all this process, but the causality is in the two ways. So, and that is very, very important conclusion. Well, the relationships are not clear. We have a black box, and we're still researching, trying to explain these relationships. And well, there are some that is more or less clear, some part of this relationship that is more or less clear, that is cultural and creative sector makes more attractive territories, and then if you make more attractive territories, you get more external investment, tourism, and so on, or talented people in the territory. So, but we don't think that this is the most important way, no? And we are researching other options like the connections through demand. So when you have a big number of people working in cultural and creative service, then you have also a big demand of people demanding innovation in all sectors, not only in the cultural and creative sector. So these kind of people generate more demand of innovation. Well, with this approach, in this project, we tried to search. You know that the result of Valencia and Barcelona are not the same as in Bilbao and Madrid. We can see that there is some kind of Mediterranean factor of this process. We tried to research about if there is a Mediterranean wave of innovation, not so depending on companies, institutions, policies, and so on, but more in sociability, a small scale of local partnerships, and so on. We tried to research about that, but I think at this moment it's only a wishful thinking. So we have no really evidence that things work in another way that in Palermo, that in Copenhagen. So, but we still researching, and we still working on that, and we want to find this to justify ourselves, our chaotic way to approach to science and academia and so on. So, but we're still searching that. In this process, we make a very interesting result of research. This is a kind of toolkit to to make regional diagnosis for European regions, to know if there are more or less propension to use cultural and creative sectors in a better way or in a worse way. And so if you want to take a look of this toolkit, it's accessible by the internet, and you look for Creative Med Toolkit, and you can prove and what happens. Well, against the plan, the initial plan, we forgot the audiovisual sector. No research about audiovisual sector for some reasons. For some reasons, because specifically in Valencia, we closed the public TV, like Greece, the regional public TV, and the behavior of the audiovisual sector, very, very dependent of this public TV, works in a very outlier way. So this probably is not useful to analyze innovation and so on in the audiovisual sector, because in the case of Valencia of these years, it's very, very specific, and so more or less act as an outlier, no, of the process. But we find the necessity, as other researchers, to incorporate the space in a very wide sense, the relevance of a space in the analysis of the behavior of cultural and creative sectors. And so we do this publication that is called The Space. We have a paper version in Spanish, and we have a web version in English. And in this publication, we try to understand which is the role of the space in a wide sense of the over the cultural and creative sectors. So in this sense, space provide resources, many kinds of resources to the process of innovation and creativity. That means financial resources, physical resources, symbolic resources, but also social capital resources and so on. The second function of a space is to provide times. When you cross to the space, you are working or you are creating or you are, so the management of time inside the spaces. And the third set of attributes that the space gives to the process of creativity and innovation is the significance. When you go inside a maker space, you are a maker. So there is, when you have something in a museum, then as is art. Is it in outside of the museum? It's not art. So the spaces gave significance, meaning to the things that happens inside the space. And we approach to the space in a very wide sense. So we speak about the public space, this new kind of maker spaces, co-working, and so all this. And we make some examples with some analysis of these kinds of spaces. Well, the third year, the last things we are doing in connection with this project is another European project where we analyze 70 good practice in cultural policies or in cultural and creative initiative in 70 cities in Europe. We make study visits and we make some kind of public policy coaching for a reduced number of cities. And finally, in the last 3 or 4 months, we are in charge of design the cultural policy of the regional government in Valencia. So it's a very challenges, and for first time, not only blah, 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 but as we do usually in the academic field. And so we have a very big problem, and we are managing now the participatory process that is very, well, if someone is interested, we can explain in more. Finally, as final consideration, we can consider, as we share with other flows of research, the place is important, the moment is important, so it's very difficult to normalize the approach in this micro approach. Another conclusion is that obviously cultural and creative sectors has not been the solution for the crisis. We can see that they behave in a more or less similar way as other economic, but we are convinced that with a real strategy to use these sectors could be a good strategy. No? What we feel is that we don't have yet the tools to control this process. We speak before that this unstable chemistry, and this is very difficult to act over the territory. I think that the process, the territories where these sectors are very, very important are in spite of the public policies. And when you make a very active public policy, you don't have the results that you said before. It's not very polite to say it here, but I think that Barcelona is a case of this. So very active politics over creative and innovative sectors, but the results are not very, very brilliant, if we see the data. So I think we need more research. We need more research, and we need more information about how to control this process. And probably the only way is to the trial and to the trial mistake and go in each territory. We're still convinced that cultural and creative sectors will be very important in the growth, the development of European region for the next decade. But we have only, to state that, we have only partial evidence in terms of more scientific approach. That's all. Thank you very much.